Hi, this is Beersborn. Welcome back to Art History. We're continuing our look at the Global Traditions chapters, specifically the Pacific Islands. Today we're going to take a look at a work that comes from the Solomon Islands. It's a prehistoric object known as the Lapita terracotta fragment. Now let's start with the formal qualities of this object, and specifically the material. This object is made out of terracotta, which is a ceramic clay. Ceramic clay starts out as a soft, malleable material that you can shape however you want, and then you harden it into a durable object by heating it up. Now, we still use terracotta today. If you're familiar with these reddish-orange flower pots that you might see, that's also terracotta. Now, typically with ceramic materials, in order to harden it, you have to put it inside what's called a kiln. And a kiln is really just a super hot oven. It's designed to reach really high temperatures that help the ceramics get really durable. Now, these prehistoric Pacific Island cultures did not have kiln technology. They didn't build kilns. So when they made these ceramic objects, they just placed them into open fires. That works, but they don't reach the same temperatures, so the objects do not get as durable. Now, to compensate for that, what these prehistoric cultures would do is add sand to their terracotta clay, which would help it to be a little bit more durable, even though it was just fired in an open fire. Now, if we look at the patterns that are on the surface of the clay, these were cut and stamped into the clay before it was fired, while the clay was still soft. Artists would use some kind of small tool to cut lines, and perhaps some kind of stamp to have these repeating geometric shapes like the circles that we see here. Now, the AP College Board likes to use the term incising, and all that means is that it was cut into the clay, so the patterns were incised into the clay. Now let's talk about the subject matter of those patterns. For the most part, what we see are geometric patterns of lines and shapes. We do sometimes see these abstracted human faces like we see on the right side here. We don't know much about what they mean, but we do know that they have a large influence across cultures that come after this group. Some of the objects that we're going to look at in this chapter, like the hiapo, for example, or like the face tattoos of Tamata Wakanene, they have a lot of the same kind of geometric patterns, the same motifs. And what we know is that that is the influence of these prehistoric cultures spreading across the Pacific Islands. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But first, let's quickly mention the function of this object. This is just a fragment of what was once a larger object, and that object was a pot of some kind. Now, pots are typically used for storage. It could have been used to store materials, water, food, or something like that. Over time, the pot was broken down, and all we have are small pieces left, but it probably had some kind of utilitarian function. Now, for the context, what's important about this piece is that it was made by a prehistoric culture called the Lapita. Now, the Lapita existed before written records, so we don't know much about them. But what we do know is that we find a lot of Lapita fragments on the Solomon Islands. But we also find them spread across the islands of the Pacific. What that tells us is that this prehistoric group was able to build boats and navigate the Pacific Ocean, visiting all these different islands and leaving behind fragments of their work. And what that leads to is a spreading of influence of the Lapita culture to the diverse groups and cultures across the Pacific Islands. Great, we'll leave it there today. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.